to Nature Revisited, a podcast that explores our relationship with the natural world. It consists of interviews, stories, and discussions that highlight the notion that nature is not a place one goes to, but rather a place one is already a part of, that we are nature. For those of you new to the podcast, my name is Stefan Van Noorden, and thank you for joining me on this episode as we feature Leigh Ann Henion and her new book, Night Magic: Adventures Among Glowworms, Moon Gardens, and Other Marvels of the Dark. Leigh Ann Henion is the author of the 2015 best-selling book, Phenomenal: A Hesitant Adventurer's Search for Wonder in the Natural World. Night Magic is a glorious celebration of the dark, an invitation to discover the biodiversity that surrounds us after the sun goes down. Leigh Ann joins me from her home in Boone, North Carolina, to talk about the nocturnal, the darkness, the night magic. So Leigh Ann, welcome to Nature Revisited. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast. So when did you first become interested in the nocturnal, in the night that surrounds us?
Looking back, I think that I've always been interested in night and in darkness. I remember going into caves and just being introduced to this world of darkness, spaces that did not experience sunlight. And I just found that incredibly fascinating. Really, much later, I sort of became aware of this idea that at night, a landscape that I thought I knew well turns into a landscape that I really don't know at all, which is even just my backyard. The idea for night magic really originated with a magazine story that I wrote for the Washington Post magazine about the synchronous fireflies of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So I went looking for fireflies, and I had a fantastic experience there. But one of the things that really struck me was night after night, I was walking around in search of fireflies, which requires no flashlights. And sometimes I was in groups of 100 people, also no flashlights. It was just such a unique experience wandering the dark like that. I started to feel like that's something I needed to experience more often. So that was really the impetus to develop a project that would allow me to spend time in the company of other nocturnal creatures to better understand my relationship to darkness by better understanding these animals' relationship to darkness.
To use one of your own questions from the book, what is darkness?
So I never thought about this until I started writing a book about darkness. It's a pretty heady question, really. I actually had an astronomer help me with that because the first question I asked was, what is light? And light, as he told me, is energy coming at us. And darkness is reduced energy. And I think that as an experience, light is a stimulant. As I've spent time with darkness, become more comfortable with darkness, I've come to equate darkness with rest, that is, reduced energy.
You are from Boone, North Carolina. How has the Appalachian culture shaped your relationship to nature, and in particular, nature after dark?
That's a big question. So I explore a lot of different species. In addition to the bats and glowworms and moths, I set out to search for foxfire. And I think that of all the scenes in the book, all the pieces of the book, I think that chapter really addresses that. A lot of people are familiar with the term foxfire, even if they're not from the Appalachian region. But I think one really interesting thing that happened when I was researching night magic, I have long been familiar with the Foxfire book series, which is a book series that codifies Appalachian folk culture and has always really reminded me of my maternal grandparents, who really did a lot of the activities that are recorded in those pages. And my mom has owned copies of those books for as long as I can remember, back before I was born. So they've always been around. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized that the name of those books, Foxfire, was related to fungi. So bioluminescent fungi, glowing mushrooms. And it was even later than that I realized that foxfire is not a specific species, as I long thought, but it's an umbrella term that refers to bioluminescent fungi, which is very prevalent in the Appalachian region. When I made that connection and I was looking into how to relate and discover the wonders of night, I made finding foxfire a priority because I'd never seen foxfire. So I ended up finding foxfire with the help of a guide who taught me, among other things, how to more safely walk in the dark, which if you're walking in the dark, you want to go heel toe so that you're not tripping over things. So I learned to recognize foxfire at night rather than in daylight. And after that experience, I went seeking foxfire on my own in my own neighborhood, only to realize that I really only knew how to recognize it at night. But I did ultimately find some twigs that were covered in bitter oysters, which is a specific species of foxfire. A really meaningful thing for me in the process of this was being able to take a branch of foxfire to my mother, who had also never seen foxfire for herself, the actual fungi. So that was a really meaningful experience. I think that growing up in this region, having family members who practice a lot of folk traditions really did shape my relationship to the landscape. And it was really special to have that direct links to natural history that tied in with cultural history. Throughout this process, I just discovered a lot of things that I had been familiar with, that were familiar to me regionally, culturally. I kind of started going next level with these things, and it's just been really a joy to discover this nocturnal world and also to recognize that the landscapes that we appreciate in daylight are often made possible by the work that is happening by these undervalued species at night.
So share with us some of the wonderful species that you encountered on various trips that you took into the night, such as salamanders, owls, fireflies, and glowworms.
One of the really exciting things early on was to recognize how many species of fireflies there are. When you have fireflies in the habitat, there are typically multiple species blinking out there. One of the most common firefly species is called the Big Dipper in this area of the East Coast. Also in my region, we have a firefly known as the Blue Ghost. And the Blue Ghost is really fantastic because they glow neon blue and they stay lit for up to 60 seconds. So really when you're watching them, it's not so much a blinking as it is this neon blue. They look like as much like fairies as anything I've ever seen in nature, what I imagine fairies to be like. So they're fantastic. Synchronous fireflies are very closely associated with Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but they were discovered just a few years ago. They have a pretty substantial population on Grandfather Mountain. When they discovered this, they decided to figure out ways to allow the public to come and experience that on the mountain. They started an event that's called Grandfather Glows, and that takes place in spring. they discovered that they have a substantial population of glowworms as well. And there are a lot of things that people call glowworms. When I talk about glowworms, I'm generally referring to the fungus gnat species that live in southern Appalachia, specifically Orphelia sultoni. And they are also neon blue. And they can turn a road embankment into a celestial scene. They look like stars all around on the ground. So many species. I learned there's such a thing, a railroad worm, which is a bioluminescent insect that is called that because the patterns on its back that light up, they look like lit windows of a passenger train. Also, the diversity of bats is amazing. Just all of these different species. It's really just so many wonders in the night that I was not aware of. Another event that I attended was Mothapalooza, which takes place in Ohio, hosted by Arc of Appalachia. This event is really moth enthusiasts, people who go out in search of moths are kind of like the birding equivalent. So the equivalent of birder is mother. And so I went and spent time with a lot of mothers. They set up these giant mothing stations where you have a sheet which allows a moth a place to land and lights which attract the moths. I think that moths get a bad rap and people often think of them as drab and really plain and just not beautiful if compared to the much beloved butterfly. But moths are incredibly diverse and they're absolutely gorgeous. Some of them as large as my two hands put together, brightly colored. If people aren't familiar, there are some moths like the rosy maple moth. Looks to me like a lemonade moth. It's like pink and yellow. And there are just so many diverse, colorful, wondrous creatures that are in the darkness, in the nights, that are underappreciated. Because I think that we often think of darkness as a void, but it is absolutely the genesis of life. It holds a wealth of biodiversity that is often overlooked.
In the book, you mentioned visiting a town in North Carolina named Silo. What makes that town so special?
So Silo is an intentional community, not all that far down the mountain from where I am. And one of the things that makes Silo special is, one, it's a community of artists in the mountains of Western North Carolina. It's really just an amazing place. But also, Silo is a place where the environment is taken into account and cared for and really treated with a level of respect that's really heartening in today's world, I think. And lights in Silo are carefully considered when artificial lights go in, just as what tree would be planted, what tree would be removed. They're also paying attention to where they put artificial light. So visiting Silo, again, not all that far from where I am, really helped me realize how my community, even though it's a rural community, has quite a bit of light pollution in comparison. It's a community that values darkness. And so that makes it special among many other things.
And as we both know, it's not just animals and insects that flourish in the night, but also nocturnal blooming flowers that can make up a moon garden. What is a moon garden?
So a moon garden is a garden that's cultivated to be enjoyed at dusk and at night. So often people will choose night blooming flowers, so flowers that only unfurl after the sun starts going down, and plants that maybe catch moonlight, like lamb's ear sometimes catches moonlight. It's a little bit fuzzy. Often white flowers are chosen for moon gardens. Historically, these would have been places prior to electricity that people would have gone to, for innocent entertainment in the evening. As I found in researching night magic, they're incredibly valuable today in terms of relating to nights and really appreciating the way that spending time in darkness can really make all senses come alive. Often plants and flowers in moon gardens are also chosen for their fragrance, species that become exceptionally fragrant after dusk. In a time of increasing artificial light, I think we've become alienated from night as habitat, as we've become alienated from a lot of different aspects of nature. And it's really powerful and empowering to be able to reconnect wherever you are right outside your back door, whatever is there. Almost assuredly something amazing that you're not aware of if you've never set out to pointedly explore at night.
So just how bad has light pollution become, and who are some of the species that it is affecting the most?
I tried really hard in the book to focus on not what light pollution takes away, but rather on what darkness offers. Because I think that we have so many storylines about what we are losing, and we are losing so much when we lose darkness. We are losing habitat, we are losing health, we are losing a myriad of things. But I think that it's really important to consider, especially because I think the marvels of night are so rarely talked about and so undervalued. It's just been a beautiful process of discovery to realize what is out there. We are losing things sometimes before we even know what we have. So light pollution has increased exponentially in the last few years. This is really a relatively new problem. Also, we have more light pollution than people initially realized because some of the satellite technology that measures it does not register blue spectral light, which comes from a lot of the LEDs that people have switched to. So we have extreme amounts of light pollution right now, and it's growing. I had an experience where I looked at a light pollution map because there are a few online resources where you can see light pollution as it expands and grows over the years. And it's really quite something to look at those maps. I know where my house is, and I can see the light encroaching on my rural neighborhood. So that was really startling to me on a personal level. And on a global level, the answer to your question is really a lot. We have a lot of light pollution, and it is growing. In terms of which species it affects, it really affects pretty much every life form on Earth because it is absolutely not in accordance with the natural cycles that we've all evolved with, from moths to birds to humans. It's truly a growing issue, but circling back, I think that when I wrote that original piece about fireflies, and people started telling me, wow, this story inspired me to turn off my porch lights more often, that was motivated by curiosity and the sense of discovery. So I think that addressing light pollution, that this is an environmental issue that maybe we don't talk about too much or think about too much. The answer to addressing light pollution is in part to kind of embrace the concept of discovery.
So what do you think we lose when we lose the darkness?
Oh, we lose so much when we lose darkness. That's part of what this book project was about, because I don't think that I realized that. And I think we think of darkness as a void, darkness as nothingness. To recognize darkness as a wealth of life, as habitat, I think that there's so much of value there that's worth preserving.
So towards the end of the book, you learn how to make fire with a bow drill. Why did you want to do that? And what did the experience teach you about your relationship to darkness?
I decided to learn how to make fire with a bow drill because I started to be really curious about what it might be like to trace the origins of artificial light back to their beginnings. Spending time with all of these different animal species helped me really absorb that I am also an animal, and we are the only fire-making species. We are the only light-making species. Learning to make fire, it was a really profound experience. Climbing mountains, collecting twigs, really focusing on what it took to create this, it helped me absorb the energy that is required to create light and the energy that it takes, what is being expended, what the trade is to have that light. But it wasn't until I made fire that I really started to absorb the power and the responsibility that comes with being the only animal species that can make light. So we're the ones that can make light, and we are the ones who can start to tone those lights down. I think that making fire and thinking through how to put out that fire and understanding the energy of all sorts that went into making that firelight, that was really impactful for me personally. It also helps me change the way that I use lights in my own life. I learned a lot about the way different light spectra affect human health. Blue light is really harmful. It's dense energy waves, whereas red light, amber lights, they're longer wavelengths. Kind of, I think of them as more relaxed wavelengths. So now when the sun goes down and the sunset is orange and red, the lights on my house actually turn amber and sometimes red. They kind of match up and indicate that it is time for me to start winding down. Red light, for example, does not disrupt human melatonin production as much as blue light. I really do credit learning how to make fire really did help me understand my relationship to light a lot better. One of the interesting and sort of complicated things that I discovered when I was working on the human chapter was this notion that darkness, as we have known it throughout evolution, might not just affect us physiologically, but that being in situations of low light can actually change the way that we think. There have been some really limited studies regarding the way that low light situations changes the way that we think and the way that we interact, the language that we use. When you think about the kinds of conversations that you have in a fluorescent lit boardroom versus the sort of conversations you might have by a campfire, they're two vastly different situations. To recognize that there might actually be some relevance to the lighting level, there is a little bit of research that indicates that might be the case. Darkness tends to have people use more imaginative language, encourages creativity. It's really fascinating. We don't know a lot about how darkness shapes things like that, but we do know that artificial lights can lead to mood disorders. And so when we disrupt the natural cycles of dark and light, it can have consequences far beyond what we might think.
So lastly, how can people become more familiar with and experience more of the magic of night?
You know, a lot of the book, I did travel throughout the region. I did seek out guides to help me understand how to relate to night, how to walk through the night, things like that. But ultimately, I ended up finding some magnificent things in my own neighborhood, in my own yard. I started out truly by just going onto my porch without the lights on, venturing out just a little bit at a time in an environment that I thought that I knew well. But ultimately, I realized that night is a parallel universe and it is accessible, right outside our doors. I really think that even if you're in a city, even if you're in a suburb, wherever you are, desert, forest, whatever your environment is, I really think that if you go to the darkest place that you can find and just sit with darkness, I think that that's really all it takes to begin that process of discovery. As your eyes really gain night vision, you will hear things and notice things that maybe you didn't if you weren't pointedly seeking to have an experience in the dark. I really think that things begin to reveal themselves when you do that, when you sit with darkness in this overlit world. My great dream is that the book will just inspire people wherever they are to learn more about the nocturnal wildlife that's around them and to just take inventory of their own spaces and just explore. Be open to this concept of discovery being possible really close to home.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Leigh Ann Henion, and that you take the opportunity to read her new book, Night Magic, and that you visit her website, leannhenion.com, to learn more about the wonderful work Leigh Ann is doing. And I also hope you find some time to experience some of the wonders that can be found in our own backyards, the creatures that flourish in the darkness, in the night magic. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with friends, family, and colleagues. And please rate us on your favorite podcast server. It will help us to reach a larger audience. You can follow Nature Revisited on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or our website, nordenproductions.com. I would also like to invite you to share your comments and ideas and even suggestions for future guests for Nature Revisited on the comment section of this episode on our website. The music for Nature Revisited is Tim Buckley, Buzz and Fly. Nature Revisited is produced by Stefan Van Norden and Charles Gagan. And I hope you will join me for the next edition of Nature Revisited. And in the meantime, remember, we are nature.